Hello and welcome to sunny Wigton, a great chance to get the shorts on this Friday afternoon. We're here to launch Here Is Our Story by Karen Campbell. Karen's been the writer-in-residence for Dumfries and Galloway Council and has produced 132 pages of short stories that really encapsulates everything that happened in the council during that initial lockdown period back in early to mid 2020. But don't take my word for it though, let's hear from Karen herself and Director of Communities Derek Crichton in this short question and answer session about the book. Karen and Derek, thanks for joining us. Karen, if we come to you first please, can you just give us a 2-minute review of, first of all, your background as a writer and how the opportunity to produce this book came about?
Thank you very much for having me, and before I say anything else, I just want to say a huge thank you to the Council for hosting my residency and for actually publishing copies of this anthology. My background is I'm a novelist, so short stories aren't necessarily my thing. Before I became a writer, I was a police officer, but I was also a council officer at Glasgow City Council. So I came to this project with quite a few different hats on, if you like. The project is part of Atlas Pandemica, which is a region-wide arts project that was managed by the Stove in Dumfries and funded by the Scottish Government Supporting Communities Fund, I think it was. And I applied to be writer-in-residence as part of Atlas Pandemica with the council because I had been working as a volunteer with the Communities Bulletin when it started. So I knew there was an awful lot of good work going on within the council, particularly the sort of behind the scenes stuff that folk maybe don't notice in the public, but council staff know it's happening, and it's what makes the wheels turn. It's what was getting vulnerable people fed, it was what was making sure key services were running. So this was an opportunity for me to try and capture that, but also put a fictional spin on it. So it allowed me to interview staff anonymously and take bits and pieces of what they told me, but folk trusted me, luckily, with their stories and let me do something a wee bit different, I would say, with them.
Derek, then, from the council sort of viewpoint, what would you say the advantages of having Karen in as writer-in-residence has been?
It's been a privilege working with Karen. It's been inspiring, it's been a breath of fresh air, and it's allowed us to actually stop. It made us stop. We were running so fast that we were meeting ourselves coming backwards, and I speak for all council staff when I say that, and therefore here was an opportunity for staff to have a very confidential conversation with a writer-in-residence, to talk openly but very privately about the very highs and sometimes the lows that they've been dealing with. So first and foremost, it gave staff that space to breathe, that space to actually stop and think and reflect. You know what? You've done a really good job, and probably for the first time in many people's careers, the community were thanking them. Now, for me, that's just phenomenal. We all know if there's an easy option, it's blame the council, and we're the first hit for when something's going wrong, regardless of we are responsible, regardless of whether we got it wrong. We're often the first hit, and I think my point was this was a project that wasn't just speaking for Dumfries and Galloway. This was speaking for councils across the country. This was a world pandemic. There was no textbook, there was no A to Z on how you deal with COVID. We were all learning, and we were all learning at a pace that was unprecedented. That brought us together, and it reminded me that one of my strap lines with staff regularly is, we've got one job, we all serve the common good of our communities. COVID shone a light on that. This project gave staff the space to talk about that openly, freely, and actually when staff are given recognition, when staff are thanked, you can see their commitment grows, and you can see the pride that they then get from that. And I think that's what we've got out of this, a real sense of achievement, togetherness, and we're not just speaking for our council, we're speaking for councils across the UK.
Actually, I think writing a novel is easier. I think because you've got a bigger canvas to splash about on, and I tend not to plot things in advance, so it takes me a while to kind of get to the point of what I'm writing about. So that big expanse of possibility in a novel is what suits me. With short stories, you've got to be much more precise and contained. It's like a wee miniature as opposed to, an epic. So that was always a challenge. But because I had the gift, if you like, of each interview, that was my wee nugget. And what I did was, I didn't kind of cogitate or deliberate. I started writing almost immediately after I'd done the interview, just to get that essence. And I think when people are beginning writing, they think you should approach it chronologically the way you would a report, say, for the council, but I find it's much more organic. It's more, you get this wee, it's like, an oyster and a bit of grit, and then you sort of form around that, and I don't always know where a story's going to start or finish, but I know the core of it. So all of these, because I had the interview and I had the sense of who that person was, even if that's not who ended up in the story. I mean, sometimes I changed gender of the people, just because it I don't know, it just felt right. And you don't always know why you make those decisions, but that was really helpful to me because I had those wee nuggets to begin with. Often the title would come. I find novel titles really hard because, again, you've got hundreds of words. How do you sum that up in 3, what the book's about? But with the short stories, and these ones in particular, often it would be because of the conversation, something somebody had said. There's one story called In the Loop. In the loop, about being connected, about not being connected, about being bubbled, I suppose, as well. You can think more about what something means than you ever anticipate at the start. That story came about because the person I was talking to was also involved in their local community association, and they were doing, they were giving out prizes last summer to say thank you to people like the local vet that provided free dog food, the local paper boy that made a point of looking in at old folk. And they put hula hoops on the ground so that every person that stood in the hula hoop would be isolated from the next person. So that's where in the Loop came from. So that, I wouldn't have thought of that had I not had these conversations. So it was a really collaborative way of working, which for a writer, normally you're alone with voices in your head. It was so different and really refreshing.
One of the other stories, talks about we can be heroes. Enjoyed that, and
Did you cry, Bob?
Slightly.
Good.
I'll admit to slightly. And I suppose for me, one of the other points that came out was this sense that somehow staff had a new pride, they had a new confidence. So you've confidentially met a few staff. What's your sense of the sort of the staff now going forward? What advice, what guidance would you give us as an organisation in terms of where we go forward as our own legacy, reflecting on this?
I think you're right about staff having a sense of pride. I think a lot of staff found that they were like sort of unofficial ambassadors for the council, no matter what service they worked for, in their street or whatever. And people again were getting clapped by their neighbours just because they knew that they worked for the council, which was unheard of in the past. How you keep that going, I don't know, because again, one person said to me, but do you know what, things are going back to normal because I got a complaint the other day. But they were kind of sanguine about it as well, because we can't live in that artificially, I don't know, I was going to say shiny happy, and it wasn't that at all, but that sense of, you're doing a great job, folks. No, we're doing our job. You're noticing us doing it, but this is the job that we always do. So I think one of the key things for me, again, having been a council employee too, is breaking down that us and them. The barriers seem to melt away within the council. Folk were working across departments in a way they hadn't done before, and realising that, people that do potholes and people that plant gardens, and it's all the same, it's still spades we're using, so there's that sense of solidarity within departments and also across different departments, but with partners outside the council and with community groups too. I think community groups were getting, basically they were saying, we need this, and the council was providing it. There was much less hierarchy. It seemed to be things were levelled out. So I don't know if there's a way, and I know it's hard because we need structures, we need accountability about finance and all the rest of it, but a way of really making councils more democratic, where communities are the ones that decide what they need, and the councils facilitate that, and staff within that are credited with knowing what they're talking about. Because I've lost count of the number of times when I worked in Glasgow that a new boss would come in. I'm not suggesting you for a minute, but they made the assumption, especially if they came from out with local authorities, they made the assumption that they were there to sort things out and local authorities didn't know what they're doing, and that's so untrue. There's such a wealth of experience and care for people have got a real pride in their job. So I think giving them that credit and giving them the autonomy almost to make their own decisions a wee bit more, I think that would be brilliant.
No, that's really helpful, because certainly as a council we are committed to community empowerment. We're committed to working throughout the council in a coordinated manner where we put the customer first, but quite clearly we're a big organisation and sometimes we lose sight of that, and I think COVID's probably provided a really sharp reminder of what does matter to the communities. And again, one of your story talked about the health emergency, which clearly COVID was, but you talked about the environment also not being forgotten and how important that was in our communities. And I certainly recall discussing with staff, and I could see them growing 2 feet taller when I said, Gavin Stevenson, the Chief Executive, has asked you, please keep cutting the grass, tend to the flowers, look after the bedding plants, and do those basic things in our communities. And I could see the sense of pride the staff had that here during this world emergency their job was still essential and still important.
Absolutely.
So thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, how much more have we all appreciated our own environment this last 18 months because we've been stuck in it, but equally we've had time to literally watch the flowers grow, we've had time to appreciate what's round about us. And it's like I used to be a cop a long time ago, but the sort of broken window theory, like if a part of your neighbourhood begins to get run down and somebody doesn't do something about it, folk start to feel nervous and uncomfortable in that environment. It possibly invites more vandalism, more crime. It's a vicious cycle. So from that point of view, it's important to have environments that are pleasant to be in, but also it's about quality of life. And I think hopefully one of the Building Back Better things that we talk about will be about what we value. And without getting too political here, councils have been cut to the bone. And when you have to decide between a library staying open or a school with not enough kids for the teacher, it shouldn't be an either or, and it shouldn't be that or potholes. All of these things are important. That's what makes where we live a nice place to be. We all want a nice environment to live in, so councils are fundamental in being the guardians of that and preserving when times are rough, doing what they can to preserve the assets and the attributes we've got for the future. So I'm not for a minute thinking this anthology is going to make any difference that way, but I suppose that was underpinning when I was writing it all the time. I'm passionate about local government for local people and it being as close to home as it can be, and that literally means the flowers that we walk past, because that was something that people commented on. There was no hanging baskets in the town last year and folk really missed that, and sometimes you don't notice what you missed till it's gone.
No, that's really insightful, and I think that comes across in many of the stories within the book. I think as a council what we're clearly aware of this year, for example, is we've got far more communities offering to help in terms of doing litter picks, in terms of actually planting some of the flowers. So there's a whole new way of working that we're embracing with our communities, which is about we're in this together. This is no longer about them and us. We've all trying our best, difficult circumstances, and you know what, let's actually just have a mutually respectful relationship where we value what we're trying to do, and on that basis there's that greater appreciation, because again, as you illustrate in one of the stories in the book, those staff who do feel valued and do feel as if their job's making a difference, it clearly builds and supports their motivation, and they do a better job.
But also, council staff, you're all members of the community as well. It isn't us and them, and that I think is something that did come out time and time again with these stories. People recognised that, they were looking at folk and appreciating them for who they were and what they did. So however much we can hold on to that kindness and that empathy for one another and not go back into the us and them and it's, you know, the council's fault for this and the public don't listen, and we're all the public and we're all the council essentially.
Yeah, great place to sort of bring things to a close. Thanks very much, Karen. Superb.
Thank you.
So Derek, where can people read or see a copy of the book?
Well, that's been one of the enjoyable things again working with Karen, because it wasn't just the case of, great, you're going to publish the book. The challenge was, what are you going to do with the book? And that's a really simple question. But actually, we've given a lot of thought to it. And again, thanks to Karen for that, because you start to think creatively and you say, think about using this in secondary schools. So every secondary school in the region will now have a copy of the book, and we're going to encourage young people to use it creatively in a manner that they want to think about them becoming creative writers. So it's going to be made use of by our young people. We've also given it to the care homes. There's some great reminiscent work being done between younger and older people, so again, it'll be used productively in that situation. But more importantly, it will freely be available in our libraries and our museums. So we're encouraging people, come in, borrow a copy, take it home, take it to your reading group. So we really want this book to go far and wide, not just across Dumfries and Galloway, but worldwide. And that's why, again, we've made arrangements for it to be available online. So really exciting that the legacy of this project continues, because we hope the book will be used as a discussion point by a wide range of people, and that will provoke debate, discussion, but fundamentally it's an archive of what happened as we as a country responded to COVID. And there's some real cracking stories that I know will stimulate discussion and debate amongst our communities, and I look forward to hearing about those in the coming months.